I have not yet lost, but I will eventually lose. I mean, probably, you know, any time now. I'm already over 2,000, so eventually someone will come around who catches a blunder or something like that. Okay, we're going to go with another e4 game. The openings are less important here than the games themselves, though. And now we're going to play a Rai Lopez, which is my main opening. That's sort of the high-level defense. Okay. And he plays the Berlin. Now, there's many ways to play against the Berlin, but we're going to go straight into it. And we're going to go into the endgame. We're going to go into the Berlin endgame because I want to show you guys that it's not just a draw. Berlin, okay, he doesn't go for the Berlin. He does not go for the Berlin. He goes d6, which is a very passive move, but that's like the Steinitz defense. That's a legitimate variation. And previously, we'd been responding earlier by going c3 and d4. But now we're at a higher rating. Let's play more topically. Let's play d4 immediately, opening up the center. Why do we open up the center? Because he's played passively. So in order to exploit that, we want to maximally open things up so that we can emphasize our advantage in development. Now, the theory in this position is to capture on c6 with the bishop, keeping our knight centralized, making a little defect in his queenside pawn structure. Now, here's the thing. What do we want to do? He wants to play c5 to dislodge our knight from the center, right? And it would be very, very nice if we could put our knight on f5. But if we put our knight on f5, let's say right now, then he will capture that knight. And if we capture with the pawn, that makes our kingside pawn structure bad, and it removes the pawn from the center. b4 would be a little bit artificial, because that would weaken the knight, it would weaken the pawn. We don't actually need to prevent c5. What we need to do is we need to prepare the move knight f5 in response to it. Remember that prophylaxis can come from both directions. You can prevent the move itself, but you can also prepare a response against the move. And queen f3 is the best way to do that, because that is also conducive to the general goals of the position. You simply bring a piece onto a better square. And we can continue to do that by bringing the bishop in. We don't have to go knight f5 yet. We can only do that in response to c5. Now we have a lot of pressure on his position. He goes knight g4. Okay. So, let me think. Yeah, so we can win a pawn here. We have a cool way of winning a pawn. Who sees it? Yeah, so the knight on g4, what jumps to mind for me, actually it doesn't win a pawn. There's some really cool complications. It actually does not win a pawn, never mind. And I'll show you guys this after the game. Scrap that. Scrap that, I'll show you guys why it doesn't win a pawn. But not right now because our time is ticking. So let's take the bishop. And obviously, this knight is super annoying, so let's kick it away. Let's go h3. Get out of here. Get out of here. Now, where should we move our queen? In the interest of the fact that we are trying to attack his king, where should we position our queen? What's sort of the typical square? The typical square is, of course, g3. And potentially we can chase the knight away with f4, although I would not play this move prematurely. Okay, so he's gone c5. In such situations, we always ask ourselves, first and foremost, what squares does a move like this leave behind? Obviously, knight f5 was what we previously intended. Now it's not quite as strong. But there is the move knight d5. And noticing the queen, and now we can go knight f5. I previously said that it's not ideal that we have a pawn that lands on f5, but the situation has changed a little bit. Now this pawn is actually an asset. Why is it an asset? Because we can go f6 and combine with a queen. Let's apply the same logic, f6. What square does this weaken? Can we get a piece to that square? Tell me the maneuver. Exactly, knight f4 and knight e6. Very methodical. Look at this juicy outpost on e6 with the knight. His knight on e5 is not on an outpost. We can always chase it away by playing f4. We don't need to rush with that move, but when the time comes, we can play that move, f4. Now, why shouldn't we rush with that move? There's a deep logic behind this. What do we not want him to do? What we don't want him to do is to trade off this knight. And the only way that he can trade off this knight is by using his own knight, okay? So what we want to do, Dr. Alonovich, is rook e1. We are anticipating that he's eventually going to try to trade off the knights, and so we're adding some beef to that knight in preparation for that. Now we go rook e4, dual purpose move. Number one, we can double to lend more support to the knight. Number two, we can rook lift. That would be another drawback of the move f4. we would prevent our own ability to rook lift. Okay, so he loses his patience, decides to exchange sacrifice, but the hesitation should tell you that he's realized that he missed something, and that is the move f4, of course, attacking the queen. It's not that simple. He can move his queen away and attack the knight, but I saw that. This is also why we played rook e4. Let's not forget the other purpose. What's the move? What's the move? Now we play the simple dark earth. Thank you for the sub. Well, queen e3 would violate the small principle we talk about, which is that when you have a task that you can do with one piece, you should usually do it with that piece rather than the queen. The queen should be left the sort of most important tasks. We double rooks and we get to e8 if he moves his knight away. Yeah, back rank mate is not going to happen cleanly because he can get his knight to f8, but he's going to be driven very much to the back rank. But let's not rush, and this is the importance of not rushing. A lot of people would immediately give a check on e8, but we need to spend a couple seconds in any position asking ourselves, is there something better? Is there something that maybe wins the game in a slightly cleaner way, and that is the move rook e7. Rook e8 also wins, but he has knight f8, and somehow he's holding on. There, I could go rook e7, but what I want to show is that principle, right? You spend 3, 4, 5 seconds, nobody's died over 3, 4, 5 seconds, and we find a move that ends the game immediately because we have a fork against the knight and the pawn, and the game is over. So he loses his knight, he loses the game. Very simple. Sort of straightforward, applying principles by the book, and that can produce some very effective chess. Now let's do piggies on the 7th. And he goes rook chase. So he continues to play. He's completely lost. How do we win this position? There's several approaches. I think the most, again, if we're playing this by the book, the simplest approach is to try to get a rook on the 8th rank. And in order to do that, we finally involve our queen. We go queen e3 and rook e8. That would be the most sort of, you know, kind of like, okay, it's not the best, but it's the simplest, right? We trade rooks. And when we trade rooks, the win is going to be super simple. We don't need to take immediately either. We can first help ourselves to a couple pawns. That's going to lighten our load a little bit. I'm sure that there were faster wins, but again, part of in the speedrun, I'm never playing badly on purpose, but sometimes I'm playing differently than I would normally play in order to illustrate the range of ideas available to us. Now, instead of trading rooks, well, we can actually just go rook c8 here. That would be the simplest. We take, and he's actually kind of hanging on here, which is kind of funny, but we can give a check here. And now the simple idea would be to get a rook to the 6th rank. How can we get the rook to e6? We want the rook to get to e6. How do we do that? Who can tell me? Rook e8 and rook e6 is going to end the game one way or another. It's going to be either checkmate or it's going to win the queen. Rook e6, queen h4, queen f7 is going to be mate, and queen f7 here is going to be a pretty mate. We can even troll him a little bit if he goes king h4. If he goes king h4, we can troll him by taking on h6. Or what's going to be the actual checkmate? Who can tell me what the mate is going to be? Let's see if I can. Let me do some professional trolling. Let me do some professional trolling. I was gonna sack my queen. I was gonna go here, and then here, but sadly he didn't allow us to do that. I was gonna see if we have a way of sacrificing both the rook and the queen. That would be pretty cool, but no. Okay, let's look at the game. So the Berlin is knight takes e4. We won't delve into the theory here, God forbid. But the Berlin, the idea behind the Berlin is this endgame, right? You guys all probably know that this leads to the Berlin endgame. And at some point I might talk a little bit about the Berlin endgame. I might talk a little bit about the Berlin endgame. But not right now. This is, extremely theoretical. So he goes d6, which is kind of passive, and d4 directly follows the principle of opening up the center when our opponent plays a little bit passively. Why is this move passive? Because it prevents his bishop from developing to c5, which is the most active square. This is not a bad line. I've played d6 myself, but it's a little bit you know, it is something that you have to play if you know it very well, because you can easily slip into a bad position, which is essentially what happens. So takes, bishop d7, knight c3, developing, bishop e7, bishop takes c6, which is the theoretical move, right? We are trading bishop for knight, leaving our knight in the center, and forcing him to introduce a defect into his pawn structure. If he takes with the bishop, we can take that bishop, or we could consider putting the knight on f5 straight away. So he takes with the pawn, and we go queen f3. Now, when would you play c3 before d4? So we could have played c3 even in this line. It's often a matter of taste. Here, I wanted to just illustrate a slightly different way of playing. Now, the idea behind queen f3, as I explained during the game, if we make just any random move, he goes c5. And we have to drop our knight back, because if we go knight f5, he takes on f5, and this is actually quite unpleasant, right? We don't want to get our pawn to f5, which is nicely blockaded by the knight and can be easily attacked by the queen. And our pawn on e4 was controlling the center, so now he has this kind of nasty idea. Well, defects in pawn structure actually don't matter that much, and that's something I've been explaining throughout. It's just that the higher you get, right, the more, and I explained this the last time, the more importance is assigned to these small factors, because small factors, when taken together, can decide the game. And one of those small factors is differences in pawn structure. While they don't usually decide the outcome of the game in and of themselves, you don't just want to make free weaknesses, if that makes sense. So queen f3. Preparing to get the knight to f5 so that we can capture it with the queen. Okay, he castles, we go bishop g5, and he goes knight g4. Now here, a lot of you were wondering why I didn't play knight takes c6. And the point of this move is it's a simple overloading tactic. The bishop on d7 is doing two things at once. It cannot accomplish them. It's defending the knight, and it was protecting the pawn. So we take the pawn, overloading the bishop. Now, bishop takes c6. Problem is we cannot take the knight immediately, because he plays bishop takes g5 and wins a piece. Now, we're also attacking the queen here. So if he takes immediately, then we win as queen. But it seems that white can simply take the bishop on e7. And now I started thinking about intermediate moves. And black has a desperado sacrifice. The knight is hanging. He's going to lose it anyway. So he might as well give it up for a pawn. But it's very important that this move also attacks white's queen. So if we count up the pieces, queen, knight, bishop takes queen, knight takes queen, we get an equal pawn endgame. White's got a ruined kingside pawn structure. Not impressive. Of course, we can also take the knight, but then black takes the bishop, and black's bishop is super good here. It's pressuring the pawn. Black can combine that with f5. So this moon knight takes h2. What did I say about details, defining games at this level? That's what I mean. Now, you might be rated 1,000, and hopefully I've explained this in a way where you should understand the rationale behind this line, right? It's not that it's impossible to understand, but calculating this in the heat of a game can be difficult. Really, that's all there is to it. It's not that it's particularly complicated. Now, if you take on e7 first and knight takes e6 now, it's actually different. Why is knight takes h2 not the same thing? Who can explain to me why this is not the same thing, first of all? And second of all, for extra credit, what is black's move in this position? Similar concept, knight takes queen comes with check. And even if it didn't, this square is undefended. So what should black do instead? Very nasty little move. What black can do here is, and I'm not sure how bad this is, but queen h4 is what I didn't like. He's attacking mate and threatening c6. It gets complicated. I decided not to go for that. Good job. So we played h3, chasing the knight away. Reposition the queen on g3, where it x-rays the king. c5. What is the drawback of this move? Aha, it weakens d5. Can we go there immediately? No, we can't. Knight is being attacked. But wait a second. Yes, we can, because it attacks the queen. Could we have gone knight f5? Yes, absolutely. Not a bad move. Takes. But I was a little bit worried about trading too many pieces. Remember that when you're up in space and when you're trying to attack, trades can lighten the load for your opponent. So, I just wasn't sure. I didn't think this was a necessary thing to do immediately. This would not have been bad. Can you explain the decision to trade darks for bishops? Well, I suppose we could have dipped our bishop back, but I didn't want to let him activate his bishop and put it on the long diagonal. So this isn't something I'm I love to do, but the alternative wastes more time and it allows him to put his bishop on a super good square. Okay. So anyways. So queen g3, c5, knight d5, and now we play knight f5. And it's very important, as I've preached several times, to use the method of comparison. To understand the differences between two different things, compare them. Don't try to understand each individually. That can be tough. Comparison can yield tremendous levels of instruction about a set of ideas or a certain position. And specifically here, I want you to compare this position to this position. In both positions, we've got this little defect in our pawn structure, 3 pawns here and a pawn on f5 doubled. But there's one key difference, as I hinted at during the game. What is that difference? There's many differences, of course, but there's one difference that makes this good for white. Well, number one, the queen is more active. That's an ancillary phenomenon. But all of this is leading up to the fact that the pawn is not blockaded. And it actually wants to go to f6. Even if he goes c6, we go f6 because we threaten checkmate, forcing him to either create tremendous weaknesses in his king side, which sets up a potential lobster pincer mate, or create weaknesses in his king side like this, when we can basically coordinate for a second wave of the attack. So this one difference, again, small differences, make the world go round. He plays f6 to blockade the pawn, but now he creates a massive weakness on e6, which we occupy immediately. Now, the move f4, very tempting, wrong, because it actually helps him get his knight to d8 and trade off our knight. So what we do is we preemptively play rook e1. f4 is not going anywhere. His knight alone is not going to cause any problems to us, right? And we're only going to go f4 when we are ready to protect this knight. In addition, we are preparing to lift our rook. Why rook e1? Well, rook d1 Orwell would not really go about defending this knight. You know, he can move his queen away. I get that you wanted to pin the queen, but this rook is kind of lame, and I can't lift it because d4 square is protected. Absolutely. Why did I choose a rook and not the f rook? I'll put it this way, guys. I think in this specific case, both moves are perfectly fine. But visually, and I went by my intuition here, it just seemed a good idea to keep another rook near my king for whatever reason. I wasn't exactly even sure why, but I thought that maybe, maybe when I play f4, this rook will somehow maneuver through f3 to g3. It's a minuscule difference. I think this was just as good, but there was something about that particular concept that I liked. That's really all there is to it. I don't think it really matters here. It doesn't make a huge difference in every case. You shouldn't overthink it. So now we go rook e4 as planned, and he loses his patience. Now, I already think he's basically lost. If he tries to get his knight around to trade, we can do two things. We can lift our rook up, and we can follow that up. Who can tell me a very, very powerful attacking idea here? White wins the game with a very pretty tactical sequence. Queen g6, h6. And now we notice type 2 undefended pieces. Rook h7 I don't think quite does the trick. We notice that black's queen is overloaded. Knight takes g7. Overloading. Very important. Rook takes h6 is a little more complicated. I think you've got to be careful here. I don't see a follow-up here. Yeah. Remember, when you only have two pieces in the attack, be super careful about sacrificing. Keeping it simple often pays a lot of dividends in the end. So he goes rook e6, and now f4 either wins the knight or allows us to infiltrate the back two ranks. A rook e8 would have also been perfectly good. But we decided to play it very simple and just win his knight, and the rest is very straightforward. Rook e8, rook takes c7, rook cc8, forcing the trade on our terms, and that basically ends the game. What if he plays rook g8 where? Oh, at the end of that line? Well, if he plays rook g8, we just checkmate him on h6, right? Once we take a pawn like this, we remove the bottom Jenga and the whole thing collapses. Any questions about this game? I feel like it was relatively simple conceptually. And I want to show you guys one really, really instructive moment from one of my games that builds on a concept that we talked about here. The concept that we talked about here is the notion of supporting an outpost, right? We had this outpost on e6, and our opponent expressed the desire to trade it by maneuvering, migrating his knight to d8. And that can actually change the game. Whether or not we can retain a piece on an outpost can really be the game-changing phenomenon. And so one of the hardest things to do in chess, one of the things that you learn to do when you become good, is to find creative ways of maintaining a piece on a particular square, particularly maintaining a knight on an outpost. And I had the chance to do that in a game that I played a couple years ago when I was in IM. And I believe that I found a very, very nice idea, which I'd like to show you guys. This game is from Philadelphia Open 2013. I made my second Grandmaster norm at this tournament. And the following position arose in round 2. I'm playing with the white pieces. My opponent at 2100. In this position, I found a very nice tactical idea. I call this a positional combination because it's tactical in nature, but the goal is positional. It's like a tactical maneuver, and it's not that difficult to see if you make the proper observations for keeping that going. So, drum roll. The move is knight d4. And the idea is to get the knight to e6. And once the knight gets on e6, that's a beautiful outpost. It's protected by the pawn. Now, there's a couple of things that need to be explained about this move, Philly Boy 44. Some people notice that the move knight h4 creates two threats, knight takes f5 and knight g6. The problem with this move is that, and let me actually remember what the problem with this move is. Knight h4 is actually not bad, but there was something. I think black can play queen f7. And if you take the pawn, you expose a very nasty little attack down the f-file. Black can move his knight away. And if white's knight moves, then queen takes f2 is going to be quite unpleasant. This is not bad, but it leads to some questionable consequences. Now, the key question about knight d4, what makes this tactical, is the fact that you have to evaluate knight takes d5. But what you guys have to understand is that this puts the knight and the king on the same diagonal. And the move bishop b3 is going to be absolutely devastating. The knight is being attacked. Queen f7 is the only defense. And now queen f3 is a simple move that wins not only this knight, but also the other knight. You're going to win both knights with the bishop. There it is. Now, why is bishop b3 immediately bad? The reason is that in basketball, you can telegraph the pass. When you go like this, you know exactly who you're going to pass it to. And you signal to your opponent, hey, I want to play knight d4, knight e6. What's the opponent going to do? Opponent's going to, no, you're not. No, you ain't. I'm going to move my queen. Queen to d7. Guess what? The only reason that knight d4 was possible was because of the temporary phenomenon of the pin. And that's something you have to exploit immediately, knight d4. Does that make sense? Okay, queen d7, knight e6, rook f e8. Now he does threaten to take on d5 because he's going to chop the legs off of the knight. So queen f3 is what I played. Okay, knight takes d5. I'm going to take with the bishop, with the queen now. He goes knight to d8, and here's what the battle revolves around. Is he going to be able to trade that knight on e6? And obviously the answer is yes. There's nothing I can do about the trade, but what do I do? What do I do in this position in order to make sure that that knight is going to be replaced by something even stronger? Bishop b3 is correct. Queen takes f5 would be inferior on account of knight takes d5, and the knight loses its support. So I go bishop b3, right? And if he takes on e6, I take with the pawn. He has to move his queen, and look at this beaut on e6. It's not a knight, but it's the next best thing. Okay? And after rook a7, I play queen takes f5, and he plays king h8. And in this position, I found the move, and the reason that I'm showing you this game consists in this move. Now, what is my opponent threatening? Why did he play king h8? The move that he played here is knight takes... the move that he intends is knight takes d5. This is a simple undermining sacrifice. Oh, not a sacrifice, sorry, tactic. You cannot take this knight because the queen is pinned. And if you play bishop takes d5, then he plays knight takes e6, restoring material equality. And most importantly, I no longer have an outpost on e6. So I've really achieved very little here. Well, yeah, Dirty Devin, I'll mention that later. But my question then is, man, I really want to keep this knight on e6. I don't want to just give it away. And I can't take on d8 because the queen hangs. If you go knight takes g7, then he's just going to take on g7 with the queen, or the king, by the way. So what the hell do we do? And in this position, I was able to find the kind of thing that I described to you guys. Prophylaxis in a tactical way. So nobody's seen the move yet, actually. Now let me tell you how I was able to find the move. This is hard, guys. And g4, I would say, is probably the second best move, although it's a little weakening. Now, the way that I thought about it is this. Let's imagine, and I call this the worst case scenario test. When you're trying to find a prophylactic move, that is, when you're trying to find a way to stop your opponent's threat, and it's not obvious how to stop it, what I suggest doing is first, assuming that your opponent accomplishes that you let him do whatever he wanted to do. All right? And I'll get to people's suggestions in a moment. You let him do what he wants to do, and you think, okay, let's broadcast to the final position, and let's look at this for a second. What move could white potentially have here? What would it be nice if white had in this position? He can't make this move, but what would it be nice? Yeah, bishop c6. Wouldn't it be nice if you could play bishop c6 and pin the queen to the rook? And then I thought, wait a second, I can set this up. And so in the starting position, rook a to c1 is the move. And this move I was quite proud of. This is, and I think you guys would agree with me, not only is this prophylactic, but it brings a piece into the game. It's a productive move as a standalone move, and it prevents knight takes d5. He did this anyway, so I'll show you guys what happened in the game. But that's how I thought about it. And that's the logic that I want you guys to apply in many, many different cases. I can give you another test position where that logic is applied directly. Now, some of you, okay, knight d4 is a very interesting move, but it fails tactically because after ed, queen d7, rook d7, the knight defends the rook on e8. Now, g4 I think is quite good, and I really like that people came up with this. The idea being after knight takes d5, knight takes d8, the queen is protected, and so bishop takes d5 is going to follow. I love that move. g4 is probably almost as good. I would say that it's a tiny bit weakening on the king's side, so maybe he can do something like this, and you know he's still kicking because we've got some of these weaknesses, but I think g4 is also very, very good. Rocket, thank you for the sub. Queen h5 blunders the queen. And I think the other moves have, you know, small tactical defects. Queen f3 is also very good, but I wanted to keep my queen active. Maybe here he plays knight f7 and tries to get his knight to g5. So rook a c1, he took on d5, and then bishop c6 happened, and now I play the move queen e4 and d4, much like we did in that speedrun game. The idea being, if knight takes d4, queen d4, and because of the pin he loses. So rook takes c5, and he resigned in this position. That basically was why I wanted to show you this game. This idea of working backwards, starting from the final position, trying to set up an idea that could have occurred in that final position is an interesting one. And let me show you guys one more example of me doing that. And then we'll play one last game. So I had one other example that I can remember where I managed, and I was quite proud of doing this, where I did something similar. Okay. So this is my game from 2006 against an international master. He was also my first coach. Okay, so this guy was good. It was a Najdorf, yeah, that's what I used to play. Okay. That's what I used to play. And in this position, I was able to find what I think is a really nice prophylactic idea. Now, in order to understand this, what is the purpose of the move h4? What is my opponent's next move going to be? And I'm not asking a trick question here, obvious question. I mean, just go on. No, don't overthink it. h4, what does he want? h5. He wants to play h5, you know? Wants to play h5, and then he wants to play h6. I don't want to allow this. I don't want him to do this. I also don't want to play h6 because that creates a hook, which you can then use to play g5, using the pawn as a battering ram. So I applied the same logic, and I asked myself, okay, wait a second. Let's imagine that he plays h5, and let's try to detect, thank you, Wolf, what new weaknesses in his position are created. Well, wait a second, I thought. This is a type 2 undefended bishop. It's only protected by the queen. That seems like a vulnerable piece. Could I try to preemptively set up a tactic against that bishop in the event of h5. Thank you, Jose MVP, with a raid of the party of 51. Really appreciate it. I hope you had a great stream. Welcome, guys. We're doing the speed run. We're doing some lectures, and you guys are getting it. The move is queen to d8. I was really proud of this move during the game. The move is queen to d8. Now, it's not necessarily the best move according to the computer. What is the idea? The idea is, if he goes h5, then I play knight takes e4. And exposes the attack on the bishop. If bishop takes e7, this is a check. And if rook takes e4, then I play bishop takes g5, and I win the pawn. This would not have been possible without the queen on d8, because I would not have had enough attacks on the bishop. He would have simply recaptured it. Segfall, thank you for the prime. Appreciate it. Now, queen c5 would also do that with the same idea. And I think queen c5 would have been interesting, but maybe here he goes bishop e3, and he x-rays the queen. In the game, he also played bishop e3, and I had time to maneuver my queen, to maneuver my pieces. I didn't have to move my queen. Knight d7, f4, and back to f6. And I was able to slam my knight into e4. This is not a trick. I mean, does this look like I'm going for tricks? No. This is... I think this is pretty high-level prophylaxis. I'm actually trying to stop his ideas. And I won the game. So I'm not saying this is the best. But I'm trying to give you guys an example of this kind of backwards thinking. You assume that your opponent accomplishes his threat, and then you try to detect retroactively the drawbacks of that, and then you try to, I was meaning to say, retroactively exploit them in the starting position. Clear? Okay, let's move on. I know that I'm dragging on about this, but hopefully it's somewhat helpful. And let's... finish with one more speedrun game, okay? At what age did you first beat a master? I think it was like probably 2004, maybe 8 or 9.